Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
Today we have, well, I don't even know how to describe what we have today other than, yo bro, just make this thing loud, dog. I want my ears to be bleeding when I'm done. That's right, SPL time. In a Toyota Tundra. In a Toyota Tacoma. Let's just get to the intro and I'll see you on the other side. So we had done a F-150 for the person, I know, right? For the person that owns this car previously. It was one of Fernando's customers. At the time, he was like, I want a really nice sounding system. I want it to sound good, crisp, clear. So that's what we gave him. Beautiful system, focals, the whole 9 yards. And he was like, it's not loud enough.
Right.
Wait a minute. You said you wanted it one way and now you want it another. Well,
right.
So there was some confusion there. This time, you got a new car. He's like, no confusion. I want my ears to bleed.
Exactly.
Fernando put him together a system. Do just that. I bet you guys are dying to know what it is. So let's dig right into it. Take a look at the equipment we're gonna be putting in it. First up, we're gonna be going with some Hertz SPL Show 6x9s. We talk about these things a lot. These things are super duper loud. It's got a neo magnet. We'll take a closer look at it once we get to pulling the factory speakers out. They make a matching 6.5-inch coaxial. For the command center, we're gonna be going with this big boy here, 10 inches of fun. The DNR 1007 XR. He wanted GPS built into the radio. This has it. Tweeters up in the dash. The ST25 Neos. This is what's gonna make his ears bleed. For amplifiers to power all this and make it just like, we're gonna go with the D 4.800 and the LC 1.800. We'll get to what that's going to power in a minute. But you're going, wait a minute, why are we doing a DSP? Well, we want it to sound good. We want to be able to EQ it. We want it loud, but we still want it to have some ability to go in there and tweak the settings and make it sound phenomenal. So we're going to go with the DSP. For subwoofers, Fernando sold him a set of the Rockford P3 shallow mounts because it's a pickup truck. And they're going to go into Fox box, 210 box that's gonna go behind the back seat. We know this thing's loud. We've already put it in Victor's car. Victor has the same truck and, well, hey, he wanted it loud too. So we know this thing is gonna put out. So the plan now is to start getting this thing apart, start putting these pieces in, and we're gonna take you guys along on the journey. Fernando, of course, is gonna start over here on the driver's door speaker. We're gonna shoot this a little bit different. We're not gonna do a bunch of time lapse and all that fun stuff. We're gonna do what we call the one camera perspective, meaning we're gonna do some work, we're gonna show you some stuff, and it's all going to be POV, with the exception of the drop-down camera, of course, because that's the POV of what we're looking at on the bench. Are you excited?
I'm excited.
Let's get started. You gonna start on the driver's door?
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna start on the dash, get that apart, and then we'll take a look at the radio and all that fun stuff. Let's just get going. Fernando, what are we doing in the door?
First thing we're gonna do, of course, is pop the door panel, roadkill the inside, outside, put a little bit around the plastic, fast rings all the way around.
We'll come back here in a second once he gets the door panel off and take a look at roadkill in progress. In the meantime, let's hop over and get this radio out of the dash. Since we're in the car, let's take a little bit closer look at everything this car has from the factory. It has steering wheel controls, factory USB, has factory navigation with a touchscreen, speakers up here in the dash, 6x9s down here in the door. The rear door has a 6.5. There's also a nice backup camera from the factory here too. So we of course want to retain all those factory features that are built into the radio, and we're going to fill all the holes where the existing speakers are. Because we're going to be doing super loud tweeters in the dash, coaxials in the door, time alignment isn't on the table. Specifically, he's like, I don't want it time aligned, I want it loud. Not that you can't time align and make a system loud, you can do amazing things. He had it in his previous car and he was like, I don't like it. And we're like, okay, no problem. As we said before, time alignment is not for everybody. Some people are just used to sound coming out of that side, sound coming out of this side. It just sounds like a sound grenade going on. He likes that. We're just gonna make that sound the best that we possibly can. Get this radio out, which I do love this two-tone dash. What do you think, Fernando?
Oh, I love it. Honestly,
cool.
that's and actually matches the SPL Show speakers.
It does match the Hertz, so this is gonna be kind of cool. To get this out, put your hands here above this grill, knuckles on the dash, and just kind of pull and push at the same time, and work your way towards the steering wheel. And then the whole piece just comes right out. Thank you. 4 10mm bolts will give us access to this. It is. Dude, this is crooked.
Yeah, it is?
Yeah.
What?
Look. Remember how like it sits flush and this one side is always in?
Mm-hmm.
Look, it's crooked. Look at the distance between, this fans out towards the driver.
Okay, so that is made to do that.
It's made to do that.
To actually like
so
the glare or something.
The kit is straight, not realizing that the factory is crooked. One of the things that we've noticed when doing these installs is that this side of the kit is always pushed in further than this side. We've never really paid attention to it until just now. We've always just fixed it. But the factory radio is actually not straight with the dash. It's shorter here and longer here.
Quarter inch. Hang on.
Is it a quarter inch?
Yeah, it's like 1.5, 1 7/8.
A little bit more than a quarter inch. Because we always use like a quarter inch and a piece of foam and that shims it out properly. If you get your radio put in and you're like, hey, wait a minute, this side is in further, you need to shim this side. An oversight on the kit manufacturers. Remove the 410s. Pull the radio out as far as you can. Put a cloth underneath it to protect the car. Start unplugging all the plugs. And there is a bunch of them on these radios. Our USB was actually caught on a piece of metal in the dash. That's why we couldn't get the radio out that far. As far as dash cavities go, there's plenty of room inside this dash for everything you're gonna be doing. There's room down here. So this is actually an install-friendly dash for sure. The next thing I wanna do while I'm in here disassembling is get this speaker out, because I'm gonna need to make brackets to house the new speaker in its place. When removing these handles, this seam is really tight. Can't tell you how many times we've been in cars and we can tell somebody's removed these. We use this. This is a metal panel tool. It's really thin here on the top. You can buy these at mobilesolutions.com and it will make your installation so much easier because they'll fit right into this gap and easily pop the panel off. Most of the bolts you'll find in this car are 10mm. This is what we removed, and we'll be making a mount to fit our tweeter in this location. Head over to the bench and we'll take a look at the replacement for this speaker. The factory uses a paper cone standard magnet. This clip here on the back, this is where a lot of people like, oh wow. This is a pass-through. How this comes is from the radio, it comes into here, and then out of here it goes into the driver's door. If you disconnect that harness and don't hook it up to anything, don't loop the wires, speakers in the door won't play. The nice thing is this is made to actually unclip off of here and you can desolder these wires off of it. If you're going to be running your own tweeter wires up to the dash to do, let's say, an active set, recommend doing that and just plug this clip back in and that will allow the sound to pass through into the door. What we're going to be replacing them with are these guys right here. We use a lot of Hertz products. If you've followed along, you know we talk about the Milli Pros a lot, which is a sound quality speaker that is very dynamic and very nice sounding if you like it loud, but yet very musical. This takes that to a whole nother level. Inside the box, we get some grills and some mounting rings. These grills are designed to push up through the mounting ring like this, and this is threaded so it will twist on. There's 2 passive crossovers in the box. And then the music maker itself. Man, it's like shiny black abyss of sound. If you look at the picture, this looks like a lot of other Neo tweeters that I'm sure you've seen, but now that you actually see it up close, you can tell it's a little bit different animal. This does unscrew, and it gets you the threaded top that you'll see on a lot of the Bullet Neo tweeters. There's 2 gaskets, as well as a top fitting and a bottom fitting, and of course the grill fitting. Basically what that means, if you have the depth, you can put this on there and it will look just like a normal tweeter in that panel. The back of this is where it totally looks different than what most of the Neo tweeters look like. It has this heatsink style magnet back plate here. You don't have the typical 2 screws that this would normally have to go over it. It's a really nice and well-built looking speaker for sure. And then buried in the deep of the box, we have these 2 grill tools. And what these are used for is there's a little slit right here and there's one on the other side. This goes in here and you can tighten it and untighten it with this. It has rubber undercoating on it. It won't scratch the anodized top here. As far as depth compared to the factory goes, it's right about the same depth. This will fit right in there and look really nice up in that dash. I need to measure this opening here so that we can make brackets to set that in the dash. And just like that, Fernando has the door panel off. This is the speaker we are going to replace. Thank you. Let's head over to the bench and see what this is and what we'll be replacing this with. A lot of people would confuse this as a 6x9, and for the most part, yeah, the inside area here is a 6x9, but you'll go out and you'll buy a 6x9 and it's not gonna work. It's not gonna bolt into place because of this big plastic bracket here. We are gonna be using a 6x9, but to get that in, we're gonna use these, the Metra 828146. Well, let's take a closer look at the speaker. This uses a little neo magnet here on the back. It is full plastic construction. This is usually where this fails, is this neo magnet glued onto this speaker. We've seen these where these have broken off and they'll actually be stuck on the back side of the door. When you close the door, they'll just like fly and you'll hear a tink and then you have no more sound. It uses a cloth surround and a paper treated cone. Replacing it, the SPL Show SX690 Neos. They do a wonderful job on packaging. They come with grills over the top of them so that you don't destroy the tweeter array. This is what you call a three-way. Why is it a three-way? Because there's 3 speakers inside of here. You have the big mid-bass here, a smaller, higher frequency tweeter, and then a bigger, lower frequency tweeter. These 2 tweeters will come together and make a beautiful sounding, super loud tweeter array. You flip it over and you see this little tiny magnet on the back. It's a neo magnet, which is the name. Over here on the end, this wire coming out to the tweeter, that means if you wanted to, you could bi-amp these by simply cutting the wire here, soldering on a new connector, and you could run these active tweeter and mid-bass. We won't be doing that on this install, but you can. Fiber pulp treated cone, a rubber surround. These are cloth dome tweeters. Looking at the 2, yeah, we're definitely doing an upgrade here. Depth-wise, this is going to be deeper. A closer look at the bracket we are going to be using compared to the factory speaker. It is a universal, meaning it is made to work in more than one Toyota, but what we want to look at is the whole pattern to make sure we have it, and also this lip here at the top. This has a lip. When it goes onto the door, it covers the same whole area. We recommend putting foam on the back of this. Even if you are going to be doing sound treatment, you don't want this to come loose or rattle. From the factory, they put a nice bead of foam on it, and then they put foam here on the front, which we will accomplish using our fast ring. The purpose of this is to couple with the door panel so that all that energy comes out into the door. If we were to just put our speaker into our bracket like this, mount this into the door, the sound will go everywhere. It won't be focused out the door panel. Adding that foam ring, it will help push that sound through the door panel, getting all this beautiful sound into the car. And as we can see, this is what it'll look like mounted in its bracket. Another bit of foam you'll want to do is on the back side of the speaker here so that it does not rattle against the plastic, or so that water or any other thing like that can get through into the car. Fernando has the bracket mounted in place. The back side of the fast ring is in there. There's 3 pieces to the fast ring. The middle section here, a back piece of foam, and then the front piece here. He added the sound treatment around the plastic bracket to help make that more rigid.
And we done. I already put the water vapor barrier, all the foam that was in the back. Don't forget about this. Same thing here, my foam in the front. We're gonna wait until I get the door panel, and if I have to trim it, then I can go and trim it a little bit. The reason why we have to trim it, when you put the door panel back on, if you see, they can actually fall and damage the speaker.
So that door is done. The next step is to head over to the inside of the door panel here. He's going to add a little bit of sound treatment around this area in here, and also I have to add in our Hertz logo to the door. This is the speaker that we want to make a copy of. Fortunately, we've done a lot of Toyotas, and one of the reasons why we use the Glowforge is for repetitious things like this. Normally we take this over to the router, we would make a bezel, we'd drill a hole through it, and all that fun stuff. But having the laser does streamline the process a little bit. This is the speaker scanned inside of the computer. We use a flatbed scanner to do that. Next thing we'll do is we'll trace it. Once we have the outside trace, we'll add the mounting holes and the tweeter hole. This is what we need to modify. With the basic shape in, I can measure each tweeter, change this hole, and make a whole new plate. To do that, we use a set of calipers, and we measure, and we end up with 1.74. Type that in here. And that's it. Now we have the size we need. We can add a logo to it, position it where we want, export the tweeter as an SVG file to our desktop. And now it's time to start printing. For this, we're gonna be using a piece of 1/4" acrylic. Once it's exported out to the desktop, we can load it into the Glowforge software. It'll estimate how much time it's gonna take us to cut this piece. I like to cut one piece at a time. Even though I'm gonna need two, I always just do one. That way, if I manage to screw something up, I don't have two bad ones. This is gonna take us a little under 2 minutes to cut. And this is the bracket we end up with, 1/4" acrylic. To get the paper off of the 1/4" acrylic, use a piece of acrylic. The hole that came out is a perfect thing to use. It won't scratch. And that's what we end up with. Nice cleaned piece. Ooh, looks like midnight. Tweeter's looking all sexy up in there. The tweeter came with 2 rubber gaskets, so we won't need to use any foam. Because there's already a grill that's gonna be over it, I don't wanna use a double grill. We'll use the back piece here, and this is gonna set our depth. One rubber gasket, the acrylic, the second rubber gasket, and our top piece. You just want to get it so that the top screw is flush with the top of the tweeter. Once it's like that, I'll flip it over to the back side and spin the back bolt into place. There's 2 flat spots on it that you can see here for doing just that. And then with our tool, we can hold it in place. There we go, we have a super tight tweeter. Let's go test fit it in the car, make sure it goes in, make sure we don't have any depth issues, and make sure that the grill goes back over the top of it. Definitely no depth issues going into the dash. It goes up into the factory tweeter hole perfect, and there's a lip on the back side of this. Let me show you. This piece here, and this piece when it goes in sits right on top of the acrylic. The only thing I have to do is put a little piece of foam around this so we don't get any rattling. And that'll seal that up into the dash perfectly. For foam that we keep talking about, we use this. It's a 1/4" 1/16" thin foam. If you're interested in picking yourself up a roll of this, you can find it on dnftooldrawer.com. What the final product is with the foam in place. Our speaker will sit up against that and we'll have a nice rattle-free mount. Since we've test fit it, everything fits fine, it goes in there, proper clearance. Now I'll make the second one.
And just like that, this front door is done. Time to move to the next one.
Hey, wait a minute, man. This one's already got the door panel off.
That's how fast I work.
Why is the door panel off?
Because we're gonna do sound treatment, coaxials in the back.
Let me get a look at that speaker and we'll compare it to what we got going in. Thank you, sir. Ooh, look at that. Yeah. This is the rear speaker. This is the rear speaker. It mounts with 3 holes. It has a plug here on the end, foam on the top just like the front, foam on the back side. This is made a lot better, believe it or not, than the front speaker. As you can see, the magnet is inside of a cup. That will prevent this from breaking off and sticking into the inside of the door. I learned something a little bit on these newer back speakers. It is still made out of plastic. They will only handle so much in heat. Paper cone, cloth surround. Now just like the front, this is a 6.5, but it's got a weird hole pattern. To mount mount our new 6.5 in the car, we're gonna use the Metra 82, 81, 48. Flip it over and compare the holes so they line up. You can also just put this on the door and see that they line up. This has these 2 extra screw down points here depending on which version of the car this is going in. For this, because we have 3 good solid points, we won't need these. It also has these tabs on the inside so that you can go with a smaller 6-inch speaker as opposed to the full 6.5 or 6 3/4. This speaker, as you can tell, is a little bit narrow. This is more of a 6 and not so much a 6.5. When you compare the depth of the 2 brackets, as you can see, this is shallower to give you room for that speaker to move on the door panel. The speaker that we are going to be putting in is the Hertz SPL Show SX165 Neo. Now, even though this is the same series as the front speaker, it is a little bit different design. It's still going to be using the Neo magnet, so we don't have that giant magnet on the back of the speaker. The tweeter wire is coming out of it, so if you needed to, you could bi-amp it. This has a smaller hard dome tweeter as opposed to the 2 soft dome tweeters we had in the other speaker. One thing I forgot to mention on the 6x9 is that this area here on the speaker is sealed. If anything were to come into the speaker in this area, like water or debris or anything like that, it's not going to get inside. It's a sealed pull piece. The cone is made out of a treated cloth, and the surround is also a treated cloth. So it's a little bit different animal. Comparing it to what we're taking out, they both do use a Neo magnet, but as you can see, this magnet is substantially bigger than this one here. The goal, of course, is to make this super loud, and this is definitely going to do that for us. With this bracket, of course, test fit in our speaker, and as you can see, it doesn't sit flat because this is a bigger 6.5. To get these tabs out of the way, pair of pliers and lift up, and now we have the opening we'll need. This will now sit flush in there and give us a factory mount for our new SPL Show speaker. I'm going to pass these over to Fernando so that he can get them into the car. Fernando's on the home stretch of the rear door. What do you got left?
I just got the connection and the outside factory.
Have you done the inside of the door panel yet? Let's take a look at that real quick. You can see that area around where the speaker is going to be is nice and rigid. Let's go over to the other side. These sides aren't done yet. Jeez. So as you can tell, the door is definitely a more rigid structure at this point, which will do 2 things for him. One, it'll help to kill any road noise that he has because it's a much more solid piece. And also, any vibration that the speaker is going to create, this is a firmer structure for it to mount to. Basically, we're giving him the best chance we can to sound the best that they can. We're going to be installing the DNR 1007 XR, the big 10.1-inch Kenwood. To get that in the dash, we're going to need a bunch of pieces. To start with, we're going to use the mounting kit, the TOYK 9714. Inside the kit are 2 different bezels depending on the size of the factory radio. To check which one you need, take the factory radio bezel, line it up from behind. We need this one. This is for a different one. As you can see, it just kind of goes through. There are 2 mounting brackets, a left and a right. They have this little arm right here attached to them. That is for a factory pocket. If you're doing something that has a single DIN back chassis, this will lock into place and give you a pocket behind the radio. Ours is a full chassis double DIN. We'll break these off. I also like to sand them flush. When prepping a kit, if you have to put it face side down, make sure you put a cloth or something underneath it so as to not scratch and mar up the kit. Most kits will also indicate what is top and what is bottom, usually the writing on it. If it's upside down, you know you have it wrong. The side brackets will sometimes have a right and left on them. In this case, they do not. That means we want to compare them with our factory radio by holding them next to it and checking for positioning. This is the driver's side, this is the passenger side. Put a D and a P. When assembling a kit, use a screwdriver, not a drill. This kit comes with 2 bags of screws, 1 to mount the radio and 1 to assemble the kit. With the kit assembled, this is made to slide over the front of our radio. It has a slight wobble left and right. That means we need to loosen these sides back up and press them into the kits. With that done, we should have equal spacing on left and right. Kenwoods need a machined screw, not a coarse thread screw. The coarse thread screws are what comes with the kit. Use the screws that come with the Kenwood radio to attach it into the kit. Check to make sure that the gapping is level across. For some reason, Kenwood only puts 6 screws in the box. They want you to do 3 on each side. Because this is a much heavier radio, I'm gonna remove 2 screws from this because these use the same screws and put them into my kit. That's all there is for the assembly on this right now. Actual 10.1 inch screen is gonna have to go on last once it's into the car because of the way that dash bezel sits over this. This has to screw into the dash bezel snaps into place, the 10.1 inch will go on afterwards. Let's take a closer look at the parts we're gonna be using. We're gonna need an antenna adapter, in this case a BAA44. This has a blue wire off the end of it here. This is if this has an amplified antenna. You would power this up with a blue wire output from the radio and or an accessory wire. To retain the factory USB, we're going to use a USB TY1. It has the factory end on it and then a normal USB on the other to plug into the radio. This particular radio only has one USB input because it has wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. The ST02 is going to allow us to retain the factory GPS antenna, and also if we were going to be doing Sirius XM, it has an adapter for that. It comes with 2 GPS antenna ends, the green style and the gray style. Kenwood uses the gray style. This would be the adapter for retaining Sirius XM. You'd also need the SVX300 add-on tuner. Because we're going with the RR, we'll be adding the RTO2 harness. There's an OBD2 connector. There's 2 add-on harnesses for retaining the backup camera. We will only be using one of them. Then also the main harness. The RR is the smart controller. It is going to talk to the car and give us all those factory features into our Kenwood radio plus a few extras. Inside this you'll find the RR itself, 2 bags of parts. The smaller bag that has the red, yellow, and black in it will have 2 of the cables we need. One, the main data connection, which has a red, black, white, and blue. I like to plug those in right away so as not to lose it. And also the USB for flashing the brain with the software. We'll not be using this power harness because there's one already in this. Inside this bag, there is one other harness we may or may need, which is this cable here. It has a 3-pin end on it and an aux jack looking on the other side. Not all Toyotas require this harness. This is for alerts and chimes and factory audio. So I'll set that on top of here for right now. You can put the rest of these harnesses inside the box. We will not be using them. Flash an RR with a Windows or a Mac. It's entirely up to you. You want to go to idatalink.com and download the WebLink desktop app. That app is going to take you step by step through the process for programming it. It's just a bunch of questions and answers. Select the year, make, and model of your car. This does not have a JBL system. Select without JBL. They're going to show you a picture of your steering wheel control. If this is the one you have in your car, which this is the only one available, select yes. Then you have to enter your radio's brand, model number, and serial number. The serial number is the most important part because it's going to allow this and the radio to talk to one another. If they don't match up, then the unit will not function. If you didn't know what harness you required, at this point it's going to tell you. It'll also tell you what optional harnesses you may need. You can program the steering wheel controls to any features you like, simply by scrolling up and down and picking the green buttons here to match what you'd like it to do. Once you're on the last page, it's going to give you an overview of everything that you've programmed it to do. By simply scrolling up, you can see that. Select flash. Now that the unit is flashed and ready to go, what we're looking for is this information right here, installation guide. That's going to tell us all the harnesses that we need. Select download. The one bummer about this is that it gives you every single Toyota's installation guide, so you have to scroll through to get to yours. A Tacoma without JBL, scroll through to the wiring diagram. This is the data connection harness here that we already have plugged into the brain. The secondary harness we may or may not have needed is not listed. This is where it would be. Down here on the bottom of the page, it's also showing the harnesses out of the box we didn't use. We will need to plug in the OBD2. If you notice here where it says no connection, that is a pigtail that is on the main harness right now, right here, that is connected. We'll be undoing that because our OBD2 is going to plug into it here. Step 2 talks about the reverse camera input. We're going to take both of these into the car and plug in to see which one we need. On the end it has this black connector here, and that is designed to plug into this here, and will complete the connection for us. At the very top it shows these RCAs. This is if you were going to be using the JBL system. That's these two guys right here. We don't have the JBL systems. We'll be cutting these tips off just like it shows in the diagram. It's time to hop into the car and see what plugs we need and don't need. The first two harnesses we have are the reverse. It's the bigger of the two. Next is this white GPS antenna. The GPS antenna runs up the side of the dash here and into the top. Kenwood uses the gray end. Clip that into place. The big fat gray harness here is our USB. That clips into place. Looking at this big white cable here, this is the antenna. We can see it has a small wire here as well as the bigger fat wire. That means this does have some form of an amplified antenna. This blue wire will need to be hooked up. With the big main harness, this plugs in. The smaller is the rear speaker. That harness plugs in. And then the big main data connection also plugs in. With all our connectors in check, it's time to make the harness. If you choose to use the wiring harness the way it is from the factory, on one end here, you'll plug into the brain. This end would be for the auxiliary if you want to retain it. Here are all the wire colors that go off to our aftermarket harness. And then our main plugs that plug into the factory connectors are all here. It's a nice layout. I like to separate mine out a little bit differently. Let's take a look. Main brain is off over here by itself. Here is my OBD2 connection. Power harnesses are all here on the end. The antenna adapter, it makes a nice T shape. My RCA, this is going to plug into the back of the radio. All those wires are funneled. And then this is my speaker connection along with my remote turn on. I have that looped through the harness so that it's all right here on the one end. But this gives me plenty of length, plenty of room to get the actual back chassis in there. Not that I need a lot of space in this room, it's just habit of doing things a specific way. The box we're going to use for this is a Fox Acoustics 210 sealed box. It has a Rhino-Line front panel and an ABS back panel. This is designed to get up into the car. It has the slit here. In order to make that happen, I need to remove all of this area here as well as these back panels here. People don't do this, and the problem they run into is you have a sub here firing into a hard piece of plastic. It's bad enough you're firing into a big piece of foam, but when you put a piece of plastic in front of it, well, it's gonna diminish the amount of bass you get. And it's not like you're ever gonna be looking at this. To start with, we're gonna need a 10 millimeter wrench to pull all these screws out, and then this is just going to need a Phillips. It is also easier if you just remove the whole back of the seat to get that new box in place. To remove the back seat, there's a 14 millimeter bolt here underneath this trim panel that just lifts up. There's another one under there, and of course there's two on the driver's side. To get this back panel off, there's 3 screw holes here. There's 2 on the driver's side. Once they're removed, simply pull back and this will pop right off. The nice thing about these clips here is that you can snap them back into place so that you won't lose them. And the 3 screws you pulled out, screw those back into their locations. Remove all the 10 millimeter bolts that you see. With all the screws out, start on the driver's side, pull this panel off first, and then you can pull off the passenger side.
That's it, huh?
Sometimes when you're in the process of doing a car stereo installation and you're moving along, you always run into little tiny hiccups here and there. And we ran into one on this truck and we had to scramble to come up with a solution. What are we talking about? The subwoofer enclosure. The subwoofer enclosure that we had, Fox Acoustics box, wasn't the right one. There was some miscommunication on the website as to which one actually works in this truck. We got the wrong one. When we went to fit it in the car, you know, we took all the back seat out, as you guys have just seen. It didn't fit right. I was like, there's something wrong here. So we did a little bit more research and we found out, yeah, no, it's not the right one. Of course, trying to get another box within isn't gonna happen unless you build it yourself, or if you have someone that can build it for you, like overnight. We do, and this is what we came up with. The problem we were having is that the box, it just didn't fit right. It just kind of floated back here, and I was like, that's not right. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Behind this panel, there's 2 vents and a motor. Of course, you have this giant bar that goes across here. The box has to be L-shaped in the back, and anyways, long story short, we designed this box last night, called our buddy Sean, and he knocked it out overnight for us. Added our logo, added a Toyota logo, bonus there. I had him put the woofers on that side, which gave us the ability to put this cover back over the seat. That way, if with this seat up, if he needs to set something back here that he doesn't want to set on the seats or something like that, he'll have the plastic here to do it. He'll get some of the functionality back for this. Test fitted it, all works, life is good. I should have took pictures last night. What I like to do when designing an enclosure is make it out of a piece of cardboard to test fit it, and then I had all my measurements. I just handed him the cardboard last night and he showed up with this morning. Let's get this out of the car, get it over there, and let's get the woofers inside of it. I found my notes. This was my rough sketch of the enclosure. This is the notch here where the seat bracket has to come through. Subwoofers wired in. The P3 Rockford shallows with grills. I like grills. I like these woofers because of these grills. All the Rockford woofers have the option for this, but it's a really nice way to protect these drivers. This is an aluminum cone driver. A lot of the Rockford woofers use this aluminum cone. Nothing sucks worse than a scratched cone, especially aluminum. Here's a closer look at what Sean did for our logos. Ready, and it's gonna go in the car now. And that's it back in place with the subwoofers. We did cut the plastic here along that rail. This would get in there, and then we left the top half. Behind here and here are 2 air vents to help reduce cabin noise. We wanted to make sure there was still something there in those. Fernando called me over because he wanted to talk about something that he's seen when we have cars come in, and that is the plug and how people don't install it the best way. What have you seen in the past?
Well, normally we have a lot of questions. I have the plug, I just want to install it. If you put it like this, of course it's gonna hit your window as soon as you roll it down. If you put it down, well, it doesn't do nothing for the speaker. One of the reasons I actually like to put a little bit of roadkill on the bar is because I cut my plug. If you go on the center of the hole and you go back, the only thing you have to cut is a little bit on the bottom.
Watch your fingers when doing this.
Yep. If you just peel it off and plug it back in, you might get the window hitting the foam. I already tested in the other door and I have to cut it at least 1/2 inch. The same way, be careful.
So to get that 1/2 inch, you just set the plug in place and roll the window up and down.
Correct.
And when it gets to that point, you mark it and cut it.
In this situation, if you see right here in the inside, it's kind of an angle. Of course, you gotta cut a little bit more.
You have to take in consideration the angle.
Because it's gonna tilt forward. As you see, I didn't cut nothing in the bottom because the window doesn't go all the way to the bottom. So we're gonna keep that one. You go right there on the center, push it a little bit. You don't have to push it hard. And that's gonna clear our window. Perfect. Second plug.
Like we talked about in the previous door, making sure that the foam isn't going to roll when you put the door panel up. Fernando's going to walk us through the process he uses to check that. He's already applied the foam to it. How do you recommend doing that? Obviously it looks like you're putting it around the outside of the speaker.
The reason why, because it actually holds better the whole bracket with the speaker, and when you put the plastic panel back in, you don't have 4 or 5 inches of foam going outside. People put it in the front. Sometimes when you're gonna replace the speaker or you wanna service the car, you're gonna get rid of the plug because put everything on top of the speaker. The next thing we have to do is test fit it our door panel. Before you snap it in, grab a light and try to look around. The foam is not gonna fall in front of the speaker. Sometimes in some of these cars, you can grab the light and put it in the side. In this situation, you can because the angle of the door panel, but it's okay. In this one, you go around, everything is fine, nothing is damaged the speaker. Now we can go and actually plug everything back in and finish the door. Last door for me. And we're done.
Good job, Fernando. Fernando has the tweeters all dressed up. It'll plug into place. He's added some shrink wrap over to it. Our capacitor is mounted. Let's get these into the car. With the two 10mm screws replaced, we can now get the A-pillar back on. While I was in there, I also ran my Bluetooth mic, put it up here by the mirror, ran it across the top, and then zip tied it all down the side here. It does make it easier to run the wire because you can run it across this area through the dash here when you have this part of the car out. The plan is to put an amplifier underneath each seat. They look very similar in shape and size underneath. I should be able to make this one here and then flip it over and put it on that side. When we build one of these, what we do is we take the measurement between the two seat frame rails, which in this case is 18 inches, and then from the back of the frame rail all the way to as far forward as we're gonna go is 18 inches also. This has seat rails that are really close, meaning the amplifier has got to be centered just right in the middle because there's two plugs on the either side that are going to ride next to the amplifier. They're about 1 inch apart. You want to make sure it's perfectly centered. We also have tapers on the center console side. Taking some pre-measurements, these things here, and then taking them over to the saw, cut up some ABS. And what I've come up with is this Space Invaders looking, or hat, template. These are where I'm gonna drill the holes for the seat bolts to go through. I also need to heat these up and bend them into place. But before I do that, I wanna copy this over onto a second one of these. It's symmetrical, left and right are identical, so I can flip it either way. I need to test it underneath the driver's seat first just to make sure, but I'm pretty positive it's gonna fit. The panel fits exactly the same way it does on the passenger side. It's an exact copy on both. When test fitting a panel, sometimes it is easier to bring it in from the back side than trying to keep coming in from the front. Just push the seat forward like this and slide it into place. Once you get the amplifier on it, then it becomes somewhat more difficult. Using some double-sided template tape, apply it to the surface. The ABS over to the back side where the shiny side is, so the tape will bite in good. You can use double-sided tape on the rough side here. It does stick better on the flat side, and since how this is symmetrical, it doesn't matter what side I tape it to. Now we have two exact copies. I'm gonna drill the holes for the seat bolts. Ta-da! I have to heat up both of these ends here so that we can heat form them into the shape of the car. After several minutes heating the plastic up, as you can see now there's a bend here, and this is formed into this recessed area where the panel goes. The same is true over here. Typically what you want to do is either put weight on this. In this case I have the amplifier there, holding this down because it will want to pull back up. Let it set and cool back to normal temperature. While that's cooling, start on that one. And that makes it 2. As you can see, the slight bend there as well. Once it cools down, we'll pull them out and I'll show you a closer look of it. With the seat mounts done, it's time to start getting these amplifiers installed. For our highs amplifier, we're gonna be running the audio control D4800. Let's take a closer look at this amplifier. This is a 4-channel DSP amplifier. It's 125 watts by 4 at 4 ohms or 200 watts by 4 at 2 ohms. On the top of the amplifier, your power, protect, and communication light. When this is plugged into a laptop, Windows or Mac, or an iPad if you add the Bluetooth dongle, this light will blink blue. GTO sense on and off. We were hooking this up to a factory radio. GTO will look at the DC offset and turn the amplifier on and off. Maximized input lights. Maximized customized output lights. This will tell us when it's clipping on the input. This will tell us when we're getting distortion on input and output when setting the gains, but the gains are done through the software. As well as your milk light, which is for source level clipping. Across the top, there are tons of indicators for if the signal is doing anything and we might want to adjust our levels. Looking at the side of the amplifier, it has two 40 amp fuses, an input for 4 gauge, front and rear RCA inputs, along with a subwoofer output. This is a 6-channel DSP, even though it's a 4-channel amplifier. It is designed for this application, where you'll be taking this as the main input and going off to a sub-amp. You can EQ and time delay through this output. Option port here is for the optional Bluetooth dongle. You can use this as a standalone amplifier if you want. It'll do dual Bluetooth, meaning there's one Bluetooth for audio and one Bluetooth for tuning the amplifier. There's 3 inputs, and the reason for that is this amplifier has a very unique feature in that there's 2 inputs for the front channels. This allows you to do summing on the front channels. An example of that would be if you're doing a car that has an active front stage. You could run the high input here, such as the tweeter mid-range combination, and then the mid bass here. Then in the software, you can blend and level adjust those two together. You also have the rear input. It uses the ACR3 volume knob. One of the questions we get a lot is which volume knob should we use, the one here or the one on the amplifier? The ACR3 gives you an option in that this has 4 presets that you can set up through the DSP. You can toggle through them with that particular bass knob. Or if you have the Bluetooth dongle, there is an app you can download on your phone and do the same features that the ACR3 does on your phone. Your output here are removable Phoenix connectors that come off of the amplifier. On our amp board, the way we've designed this inset here is the point we want the fins of this amplifier to attach to. We want to make sure it's centered here with left and right, and then the heatsink rests up against this lip towards the back. 4 screws to hold it in place, and then this front area here is going to be for our wiring. The power wire is going to come out and go down this side here because this amplifier is going on the driver's side of the car. The RCAs are going to come across and go up the center console into the back of the radio along with the speaker wires. The sub RCA is going to come across, go through the center console and over to the sub amp. Let's get started. In preparation for wiring up the amplifier, I've prepared the wiring that we're going to be using on this. We like to cover our wire in a flexible braided loom. We use ferrules on the end, and we use our branded logo heat shrink. Ground is black. On our positive, we have a red piece of heat shrink. We're using speed wire to connect this up into the dash. Speed wire is a 9-conductor wire, 9 conductors. There's 8 speaker wires and then a 9th remote turn on, a blue wire. We've wired in a second blue wire. This is going to run off to the sub amp underneath the other seat. Prepped our 4000 series Stinger RCAs. We use heat shrink to denote what each is for: green, purple, a white, a gray, and those are telling us what corners of the car they're going to work on. They also match up to the same colors on the speed wire. White is driver's front, gray is passenger front, green is driver's rear, and purple is passenger rear. When attaching all your wiring, I like to break them into segments. I also like to think of them in layers. Power is going to have to come this way. We want to get our signal wires and speaker wires in place first, so we'll start there. Farthest corner out is going to be our speaker. That's going to be this harness. The Phoenix plugs, as I showed, do unplug. Start with the rear, front is on top. I want to keep this in as tight to the amplifier as possible. For that, I'm going to drill my holes along here. I'll use our clean wire ruler that you can pick up at Mobile Solutions to prep our holes. I'll line up where I want my first hole to be. Check to make sure all our holes will line up where we want them. In this case, if our hole falls in line with the logo, if you want to make sure the logo is clean, don't put a zip tie there. Otherwise, you're good. Right about there looks perfect. Push this up against the amplifier like so. We're going to be using 4-inch zip ties. That means I need a 9 64th drill bit, which is this right here. I want my holes as close to this amplifier as possible. The ruler was designed to allow us to get them as close as we can because of the fact that we still need plastic there. I want to go a little bit closer than that. For that, I'm going to pull this out like this, giving me 1/8 of an inch between the amplifier and the ruler. And I'm going to drill my holes. Those first holes drilled, I can go back and use those as a guide to drill my other When threading the zip ties through, they have an end, they have a length. I want this head to be at this back hole. I'm gonna come up through this hole in the front. That'll allow me to wrap it around and put this head here at the back hole. The reason for doing that is so that as I move out this way, these holes where I might need to run another zip tie through won't be plugged by the head. This is what we end up with, nice and tight against the amplifier. That moves us to the next portion, which is gonna be our bass knob, high level, or RCAs, or all of them. Because you could run high level into this and an RC out to your sub amp. You could also be using this bass knob. For this, we're just gonna be using the RCAs here, and we have them all prepped and ready to go. These are directional RCAs. Stinger does do a nice job of putting little flags on the end. The 4-channel that have the heat shrink on, we wanna make sure these white flags go towards the radio. The one that's gonna be going over to the sub, we wanna make sure that the flag is here at the amplifier, because for that one, this is the source unit. When plugging in RCAs, they have a tendency to want to twist. Try to flatten them out as much as possible by running your fingers along them and plugging them in. Making sure that the RCAs are nice and straight, we're going to move them and run them in parallel with this wire here. Inside the car, they're gonna go up through the center console and the hump this way. RCAs are nice because you can easily stack them on top of one another. What I need to do is figure out how far over I need to make my first hole. I'll mark it. Can use my ruler to drill the rest of those holes so that they're the same hole pattern. And that's the look I was going for with the RCAs. These two wires are going to head up into the center console. This is my RCA with remote turn on wire for the sub amp. That leaves us with the last two wires on here, which are my power and ground. These two wires just need to come out straight. There is a hole from the factory located right here, so they'll turn once they get here and run up over into the engine bay. Putting my wire ruler underneath power wire, I can position it where I need it to be. Using these hole patterns, I want the wire to come in on the amp board right about here. That way it clears all of these. I'm gonna flip the wire ruler to the other side where my holes are tighter together. And now I can get 3 holes. I really want my power wire to stay nice and tight into this. That gives me my first holes. Move the wire ruler over. Second holes, there is a gap between the two for where the remote turn on would normally go. I'm gonna retain that gap. To do that, I'm just gonna line my ruler up on the holes here. Move it over the same distance that I have here. Add in my zip ties. That brings us to the final conclusion on this amp rack. Let's take a closer look. As you can see, the power wire clears the RCAs and speaker wire. Taking a closer look at the back side, you can see how all the zip ties go in the same direction. This is what I was talking about earlier. If we needed to keep drilling holes this way, the ends would fill in the previous holes and leave the next hole open, just like it's doing here. And now for the fun part, getting it into the car and starting to get those wires across. I'm gonna do that first before I start on the second amplifier. Let's take a closer look now that the amplifier is in the car. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, when mounting an amp like this, where do you ground it? A lot of the times there is a factory ground point somewhere in this area, and in this case there's one right here. There's a factory ground attached to it. It's a big 10mm bolt. Easy enough. Pull the bolt out, put our new ground in place. Amplifier's grounded. Power wire runs up along the side here and is waiting right in this area here for Fernando to get into the firewall and make his fuse holder mount. Pull the center console out. Our wire runs up and through here, comes up through the dash and is chilling out right here. Back into the center console. This is the wire that is going to run underneath that seat, so that's our RCA and remote turn on. I haven't ran that over yet. I'm going to wait until we get this portion of it. With that being said, it is time to grab the second amplifier. I'll meet you over there and we'll talk about how we're going to wire that up. The LC 1.800 is the exact same size as the D 4.800. That means it's going to go in the exact same spot on this. Both seats basically have the same track underneath them. Let's take a closer look at this amplifier. It has the power and protect lights, the GTO sense, it has AccuBase. A nice feature about the LCs is they have their line output converters built into them. This essentially has an LC2I built into it. So you have the full AccuBase circuit. AccuBase is for fixing a situation where you have bass roll off. Whereas you turn up the volume, the mids and highs continue to get loud, but your bass stops producing. This adjustment enables you to fix that. It needs the on-off switch because like in this case, we're doing line level in, it isn't gonna have any bass roll-off. Crossover vary between 30 and 230. Gain control, 180-degree phase switch, your milk source input protection light, and your gain maximized light. Same distortion detection. On the end, we have two 40-amp fuses, 4-gauge input. Our high-level input is located here. Line level input, the ARC1 bass knob input, and 8-gauge subwoofer output wires. We are going to be using the ARC1 on this. The reason why I like using this is that it's just a straight volume knob. It's just up and down. There's no other features in it. You can't accidentally push it and change things. Just volume up, volume down, bass more, bass less. Yay. I like to grab the wire for this first and get it into the amplifier because even still to this day, I forget to run this. Center up the amplifier and get it screwed into place. When working with ABS, I strongly recommend you always pre-drill. ABS just doesn't act well when you just go right into it with a screw. Time to come up with a game plan in order to run these wires. We already know that the signal wire and the remote turn on are going to come across through here. I'm going to pre-drill those same holes into this and zip tie it into place once I get it into the car. The sub wire, which is located on this side, is going to come across and go because I need that to go up into the passenger side of the car. When we had the box built, we had the speaker cup put on the passenger side. The power wire is also going to come out this way too. We're going to run it up the floorboard and into the engine bay on the passenger side because there's a couple grommets there to go through. We'll have two outputs in the firewall, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. That'll make it easier though getting that wire across. In this particular vehicle, we have a nice big route to run our wire through the engine bay over to the battery. With the plan established, just like on the previous amplifier, I made up my wiring, ground, power, then a subwoofer wire here. It's a dual 10 gauge. The first thing I want to do is drill my holes here against the side for the bass knob wire. This is going to run up into the center console. Next to the emergency brake is where we're going to put the bass knob. I'll use the wire ruler to mark where I want my first set of holes to go. I'll switch to the longer one to add in a hole for my RCA run, as well as my remote turn on. Slide it down a bit, drill my next row of holes. Add in the zip ties. These I'm just gonna loop through and have ready for when we get it into the car, and then I'll cinch them up. It's time to add in my sub wire. Just like on the other side of the car, there is a hole in this area here that I can run my wire directly out of. That means that the sub wire is just gonna be a straight shot out. If you're gonna be doing a sub wire with any form of labeled heat shrink or something like that, make sure that you pay attention to where the positive and negatives is. You don't wanna put it on like this and you can't see the logo. Line up where I'd like my holes to be, and just like on the other side, I'm going to use the shorter holes because this is going to be coming out and bending. Slide the ruler over, add in our zip tie. Brings us to power, which is the last portion we need to worry about. This is going to go straight out too. The nice thing about having clone left and right amp mounts and the way the power wire works, we're going to do the same exact mounts on this side as we did on the other side. We just need to line them up, get them straight, drill our holes. Holes are all drilled, and add our zip ties. This amp board is all set and ready to get into the car now. We'll take a closer look at it once we get the RCA ran into place and the remote turn on hooked up. The amp managed to creep its way underneath the seat, cinched up all the zip ties. This seat also had the ground right here, so we were able to use the factory ground point. Subwire is running back, ran in, and is connected to the subwoofer back here. Power wire is ran along inside and up into the firewall. Also, the bass knob wire is located right about where it needs to be. The bass knob is located here next to the emergency brake. It is mounted in place. This is Toyota and audio control. I just have to get it now into there. In the car, it looks just like this. You can easily get to that volume knob. Yeah, just there you go. Fernando asked me to add some imagery to his fuse holder, so we have done that. I will get this over to him so that he can get it into the car. What we have is the audio control and system fuse. Here you go, man.
Thank you, sir.
Fernando has informed me that the battery is done. We have labeled on the wire to tell us what amp goes to what fuse. This is the LC 1.800 fuse here. It's labeled on all sides. If these do have to come apart for a reason, you make sure you get the right one matched up. These also are made to come off, bolted in here, but if you just need to remove this panel, You just twist the fuse, it comes right off of the mount. You can easily remove this panel and get back, replace the battery, put everything back in place. This bolt is a second bolt. This isn't the bolt that's holding the battery, there's another bolt underneath it. That way, if you do need to take this panel out, you can take it out. The battery mount is still in place. We've also added in a second ground wire. This was the factory ground here to the body. We've added a 4-gauge ground to that. Next is going to be plugging in the interface. Already connected in the speed wire. I just have to get the rest of the plugs in, and we can get this back together and take a look at how to attach that front screen. When plugging in the aftermarket radio, some cables are going to be longer than others. For example, this GPS antenna here is pretty long. Start with your longest cables. It'll make it much easier as you're working back into the dash. Also, try to keep an eye on how the cables lay on top of one another. It's extremely hard to keep this organized when moving products back into the dash. There's just so much going on. But having a little bit of rhyme or reason to it will make it a little easier. The last thing you want to do before you start putting in the dash is just go over it mentally in your head, making sure that something didn't get pushed into the dash, all the cables are in nice and tight. Once you're satisfied with that, tip it up, start sliding it into place. I like to go up high in the dash to check underneath. Also, if you have screws that need to go in on the bottom somewhere, always keep an eye on that. It's helpful to have some kind of a flashlight in place to see. The radio should go in fairly easy. There should be no resistance with it. It should set freely onto the back place. If you're having to push it all the way in to get it in there, pull it back out and see if you can move some of the wiring down and out of the way or off to the side. You don't want a bunch of wires bunched up behind the radio. If you run into a situation where there's plastic behind it that you can remove it. When you're satisfied, screw it into place. We need to get that top cover on here so that we can get our radio in and make sure it turns on. This radio has a locking mechanism that has to be installed in place in order for this radio to turn on. You have to screw the front panel into these metal brackets and this piece will go on last. To test it though, just to make sure that it's gonna work, we can simply set this in place into the switches, slide this into the dash. Our unit powers up, test our backup camera, steering wheel controls, and make sure that those peripherals work. Testing the volume, up and down. The nice thing about the iData interface is that if one button works, they should all work, unless there's something wrong with the steering wheel. This is fairly new. The likelihood of that happening is pretty thin. Plug in our phone and test to make sure CarPlay works. Reverse camera is working. We also have backup sensors that are on. Navigation is coming up. With all those tests done, pull our screen back out and we'll get it screwed into place. This screen does tilt without being locked in. It has a friction hinge, which is really, really nice. Pull it all the way forward, and this will allow you to get into the back of the radio and put your 4 screws in. And there we have it. The radio's mounted in the dash. At the beginning of every install we do where there's going to be some form of DSP alignment, we measure the seat's location in the car. That way when we go to set up for our tune, it's exactly the place it was when it showed up, which we assume is going to be the driver's setting. That way when they hop in, it's right where it was, they're comfortable, and it's tuned to that part of the car. A couple places you want to take measurements from. The steering wheel moves up and down, and sometimes you have to lower it in order to get the dash bezel off. Don't use this as a measurement. You want to use like the top of the dash here, the top of the knee buster down here, the floor, the ceiling. On the seat itself, nice lines like this, or all the way in there also make good places to measure too, because they don't move, and also they're not cushioned. Measuring somewhere up here is somewhat difficult. Measuring to this line is perfect because it's always going to be in that same spot. One of the other things you want to do as well is before you tune it, if it has floor mats of any kind, put those back into place. In this case, it has these rubber floor mats. Sometimes people have 6 and 7 floor mats stacked up in their car. It could possibly change the way it EQs if you're using an RTA. An RTA will pick up every minute change. We'll play some basic pink noise. Right now I have it going to the passenger. We need to make sure this tweeter and that mid-range is playing. We're good. Move it to the back corner. That speaker's playing. Move it to the front.
Yes.
Center it back up and we'll move on to our polarity test. Our door should be green, which we're getting a green light. And our dash should be red. And we're good there. Rear door should also be green. The passenger side checks out. We'll move on to the driver's side, check those. And then it's on to using the microphone here and seeing what this sounds like. For our tuning, we'll be using the Educar Test and Tune app. We'll have it on tune and we'll be playing mono pink noise. What we have set up on the bench are 2 laptops. This is a Windows base. This is a Macintosh. The Mac is running the DM RTA. This will be so we can see what's happening in the car. The Windows machine is running our DSP software. We can use either one to do this because the audio control is cross-platform compatible. This system just works best for us. One of the things to keep in mind about D4800 is in the input settings, the gain is turned all the way up from the factory for testing purposes before it leaves. The first thing we do when we get it and plug it in is go in and we set the gain to 0. It's in the input view here. You just click on it and turn it back to 0. Make sure you do that on all your inputs. The next thing you want to do is come over here to your output view. On this particular processor, both front and rear are connected to both channels for testing purposes before it leaves the factory. Click front for front, however you'd like to set up those channels. And then go in and set up your crossover however you'd like to have that done. And that's like the basic before you get going. We've been dying to see what this is gonna look like on the RTA with those giant tweeters. It's not something we do a lot of. Most of the time when you look at an RTA, it's like giant hill for subwoofer and then it gradually goes down and over to the corner for tweeter. My guess is when we play this, we're just gonna have those giant side where the tweeter is. Let's take a look. I'm not disappointed. This is the tweeter with those super tweeters in there. You can see these things have 107 dBs of efficiency, so they are just killing it. This is our subwoofer over here. Now that might be turned down in the car. I'm gonna check. No, that is definitely with the subwoofer. Now I haven't set the gain on the amplifier. It's still turned all the way down. So we'll come back to that. But this, wow. This is loud, guys. This is what you're looking at. Whew. We are gonna try to tame this down just a little because when you're sitting in the car right now, you can go blind. But we wanna keep this. We just want to mildly just take it down just a touch. So we've had our first go around with the tune. The tweeter was up here before and we have mellowed it out some. The subwoofer is off right now, so there's nothing playing over there. Keep in mind, this is a loud system. We want this thing to make our ears bleed. Right, Fernando?
And they're bleeding right now.
They're definitely bleeding right now. You sat in the car and listened to this.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, man, it's rough. It's definitely rough.
It is.
Fernando would like me to turn it down just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Two is that he had a dash mat in the car, and we were worried, foolishly, about whether or not it was gonna affect the way the tweeter sounded. And the first thing we're like, you know what, let's put the dash mat back on and tune it that way, because these tweeters easily power through this mat.
Yes.
Easily. Have a go at it again, he says, Dean. With our second go around, as you can see now, bringing this tweeter down even more, we've captured back some of the mid bass. Now sitting in the car with Fernando, and he's like, all right, this is much better. This is what the guy was looking for. Most of you guys are not gonna want this. I can tell you this right now. Some of you guys are. Either way, Fernando's happy with this result right now. That means I'm gonna move on to the rear speakers and have those do some funness for us to bring them in to balance in with this. All right, and this is our final tune. This is showing what it looks like with the subwoofer in place. We have the gain for that set and optimized. As you can see, this transition through here is not as steep as it was in the beginning. It was way up here. Tamed this out, but we still kept that action. And this is action, guys. Holy cow.
Yep.
We blended in the rear speakers to match, so everything is now doing what we feel the customer's goals were. It's time for the final listen and hop in and listen to everything. Now this, as we said, he doesn't want a time alignment. He wants everything to make sound from everywhere and be loud. So we're gonna have to hop in and Listen to it from many different positions, front, rear, side to side. Make sure that all those boxes are ticked. Make sure to pull the microphone off of the headrest. That way it doesn't spike you in the neck. Alright guys. Wow.
What?
Ugh. Dude, I'm not gonna tell you, Dude, I'm not gonna lie, my ears are hurting. But that was the goal of this system. Everyone has certain criteria in which they feel they want to do. We've done 2 previous cars for him. This was something he wanted. This was like, this is what I want. Fernando and him, you guys spent like 2 hours going over this. There was 2 trips back and forth. There was a lot of time put into this.
Talking, yeah.
He wanted this specific sound, and his buddies have loudspeakers, and he was like, I want that. I want a hybrid. I want somewhere between that. I want something that's gonna have some mid bass, but also I want it to just, yeah,
and sound good.
This one does.
Yeah.
This one does for sure. Whew, it's been a long journey. It has. It's like 2.5 days on this one, guys.
Yes.
A lot of little pieces, as always, little details that go in that just make it. But that's it. We're done. Thank you so much for watching, as always. Fernando.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night, as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye.